Today, we're diving into a really fascinating, and for some, a pretty radical reinterpretation of three foundational words in the Quran. We're looking at one author's investigation that seriously challenges centuries of convention and tries to reframe the entire idea of divine guidance. Everything kicks off with this one massive question. Now, for billions of people, the answer is an immediate and obvious yes. But for the author, whose work we're exploring today, this very idea became the starting point for a huge intellectual and spiritual puzzle. And this wasn't just some abstract philosophical debate. The author's journey started with a couple of tangible, real-world problems that they didn't add up under the conventional way of thinking. Okay, so the first problem was purely physical. The earliest known complete manuscript of the Quran weighs a staggering 80 kilograms. That's about 176 pounds. This led the author to ask a really nagging question. How could the prophet have constantly referred to this Quran as if holding it if this was an object he literally couldn't carry? The second problem was a spiritual one. The author just couldn't square the idea of a just God locking universal guidance behind a single, ancient language that most of humanity couldn't understand. So this whole project wasn't an attack on faith. In their mind, it was a defense of it. It was a mission that launched a deep academic dive back into the text. So where do you even start with a mystery like that? Well, the first domino to fall was the very word that created the language barrier in the first place, the word Arabic. We all think we know what Arabic means, right? It's a language from the Middle East, but this author proposes something completely different. What if, in the context of this book, Arabic isn't a proper noun for a language at all? What if it's actually an adjective, a word that describes a quality of communication? In this view, a message delivered in Arabic is just a clear message. It's speech that is articulate and easily understood by the listener, maybe in their own mother tongue. So Chinese could be Arabic to a Chinese speaker. English could be Arabic to an English speaker. It's all about clarity, not geography. So what's the proof for this pretty wild idea? Well, it's fascinating. The author argues that the text itself defines Arabic by giving us its direct opposite, the word ajmi, which means foreign, strange, or just plain incomprehensible. And boom, here's where it all comes together. According to the author, this verse puts the two words right next to each other in perfect contrast. It's saying that some other source is ajmi, unclear, foreign, but this message, it's Arabic. It's clear and articulate. For the author, this was the linguistic smoking gun. Okay, so if Arabic just means clear, that opens up a whole new can of worms. What exactly is the Quran that's being described as clear in the first place? So the author applies another logical test. The text says it contains every kind of example, but the physical book, well, it obviously doesn't. You're not going to find a cure for the flu or blueprints for a computer in there. This contradiction made the author wonder if the Quran being discussed in the text was ever meant to be the physical book we know. And this led to the second huge reinterpretation. The author argues that Quran doesn't actually refer to the bound book on your shelf. Instead, it refers to the process of deep reflection and the clear, articulate expression that comes out of it. It's an inner compilation of thoughts, not an external object. And I build this case with some pretty interesting linguistic clues. For instance, the word used for made in relation to the Quran is one that's usually for non-physical things, like making the day and night. The grammar also suggests a Quran, like one instance of a compilation, not the Quran, a specific book title. And if you translate it literally, you get weird phrases like read the reading. The author uses this powerful analogy to really drive the point home. Just chanting the words on a doctor's prescription won't cure you, right? You have to understand it and apply it. In the same way, they argue, the point isn't just to recite a book, but to engage in that internal process of Quran, that deep thinking that leads to real understanding and action. All right, this leads us to the final and maybe the most profound piece of this entire puzzle. If the Quran is the expression that comes from deep thought, where does that thought come from? What's the source? Here, the author brings in a third term, Kitab. Now, it's often seen as just another word for the Quran, but in this reading, no way. Kitab is something much, much bigger. It's the mother book, a universal built-in script of wisdom and guidance that exists inside every single human being. Think of it like this. Kitab is the computer's hard drive, and a Quran is the file you pull up on screen. And what's wild is that the text seems to back up this idea of an internal book. This verse, for instance, doesn't say read that book over there. It says read your own script. It points inward. And here's another key verse the author points to. It suggests this inner script isn't some strange alien thing. It's something we're supposed to know with this deep, intuitive familiarity, the same way you'd recognize your own child. So this all builds to a completely new model for how this all works. You start with Kitab, that universal knowledge already inside you. Through deep reflection, you access it. That process creates an Quran, a clear, articulate expression of that inner wisdom. And the 114-chapter book we know? In this model, it's a written record of one of the most powerful Qur'ans ever expressed. So what happens when we put these three big ideas together? Well, the entire framework for what guidance is and where it comes from, it shifts completely. So let's just recap. Arabic goes from being a specific language to meaning clarity itself. The Quran goes from being a physical book to being an intellectual process. And Al-Kitab goes from being just another name for the book to being the universal source code of wisdom that's inside all of us. And this right here is the ultimate conclusion of the author's work. Divine wisdom is no longer this external text from one specific culture that you have to learn in a foreign tongue. Instead, it becomes an internal, universal potential, a script that anyone, anywhere, can access through sincere, deep reflection. It's a really radical reframing, one that shifts the focus from outside authorities to the individual thinker, and it leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If this author is onto something, what becomes possible when we all learn how to read our own script?